This woman's sister walked into her room completely naked while her boyfriend was still in bed. And that's not even the wildest part. A year later, the sister laughed it off and said she was the one who needed therapy. Seriously, what do you even do with that? And that's just one story. Today's lineup is straight up chaos. From drunken disasters to betrayal before the wedding day, it's messy, it's emotional, and it's all straight from Reddit. Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to AITA Chronicles, where we break down the wildest Reddit Am I the Asshole stories every single day. If you're into family feuds, moral dilemmas, and situations that make you yell at your screen, you're in the right place. Our goal, 10K subscribers, and every single one of you watching helps us get there. So hit that like button, subscribe, and let's jump into today's madness. Am I the asshole for embarrassing my mother-in-law in front of guests after she implied I don't do real work? The writer, a 28-year-old woman, works from home as a software developer. It's a career that demands mental agility, long hours, and constant adaptation to the ever-evolving world of tech. But for some reason, that reality never quite made it into the worldview of her mother-in-law. Ah, yes, the mother-in-law. She's 58. The kind of woman who believes real work involves a time card, a commute, and a lot of visible exhaustion. You know the type. If you're not physically dragging yourself into a break room with a chipped coffee mug and bad fluorescent lighting, it doesn't count. Every time she visits, the writer gets little verbal jabs, snide comments masked as jokes. Must be nice to sit in pajamas all day, Mill would say, not realizing, or perhaps not caring, how those words landed. Back in my day, we actually had to commute to work. It's subtle, it's repetitive, and it cuts just a little deeper each time. Let's pause there. It's so easy to dismiss these comments as harmless, but over time it becomes exhausting. Death by 1,000 condescending remarks. The implication is always the same. You don't work as hard as I did. You don't work hard enough to matter. Fast forward to this past weekend. The writer and her husband hosted a small barbecue, just a casual, friendly get-together. Good food, laughter, and for a brief moment, peace. That is until someone innocently asked the writer what she does for a living. Before she could even answer, the mother-in-law, true to form, let out a chuckle and quipped, "Oh, she watches Netflix and calls it coding." Oof, there it was. Another public dismissal, another attempt to chip away at her credibility, this time in front of friends and family. It wasn't just a joke, it was layered with disrespect. And this time, the writer didn't let it slide. She smiled, not with bitterness, not with rage, just the kind of calm, collected smile that precedes a truth bomb. And then she said, "Yeah, and that Netflix paid off your son's student loans and bought this house." The air changed, the mood shifted, and then laughter. The guests chuckled, maybe even clapped, not in mockery, but in recognition. They saw it, they got it. But the mother-in-law, she got quiet, silent even. A woman who always had something to say suddenly had nothing at all. Later that night, the writer's husband said she was mean, that she should have let it slide. But here's the thing. How many times are you supposed to let it slide before you're allowed to stand your ground? This wasn't a random snarky comment. This was a pattern, a constant undermining of the writer's identity and accomplishments, and all she did was point out a truth. Her work has paid off. Literally. Her success is real, and yet her worth keeps being measured by someone stuck in a decades-old definition of real work. Was it blunt? Maybe. Was it unnecessary? That depends. How many subtle insults should one be expected to endure before it's acceptable to push back? So, am I the asshole for finally saying something? For drawing a line in the sand with a perfectly timed clapback? Or is it time we stop letting passive-aggressive behavior go unchecked just because it's coming from someone older or someone we're supposed to respect? Because respect isn't a one-way street. And if you keep devaluing someone's work, don't be surprised when they eventually prove just how valuable they are. Let the audience decide. Am I the asshole for refusing to pay for my husband's birthday dinner after he pranked me in front of everyone? Let's set the scene. The writer, a 28-year-old woman, is doing something thoughtful, something kind, something that, frankly, a lot of people take for granted in relationships. She plans a birthday celebration, Not just a thrown-together dinner, but a reservation at her husband's favorite steakhouse. A hand-picked group of close friends and family. 10 guests total. Enough for intimacy, but just enough to make it special, and she pays for it all. Every last dollar, not because she has to, but because she wants to make this day meaningful for the man she loves. And for a moment, it is. The lights are warm, the wine is flowing, laughter hums around the table. Then the writer stands up, she raises her glass, a toast, not about her, but about him, about his success, his promotion, his hard work. And just as her words start to lift the room, he cuts her off. He doesn't thank her. He doesn't let her finish. No, instead, he decides this is the perfect moment to drop a so-called prank, a little joke he thought would be funny. You know what would really make this birthday better? If Ryder finally admitted she's pregnant. Silence. Confusion. All eyes turn to her. Her mother-in-law starts squealing, her face already damp with happy tears. Her boss, who was invited as a gesture of gratitude for helping her husband get promoted, stands up to congratulate them. Only there's one problem. She's not pregnant. She's not even trying to be. And what's worse, she had a miscarriage. In March, a loss that still lingers in the corners of her heart, a pain her husband knows all too well. And yet, here he is, tossing it around like a party joke, like it's just a line in a sitcom. Let's take a beat here. Because this isn't just about being offended. This isn't about lacking a sense of humor. This is about betrayal. This is about standing up in front of your loved ones, feeling seen, only to be reduced to a punchline. The writer, in complete disbelief, looks at him and says, "What the hell are you doing?" And what does he do? He laughs. He smirks. He calls it a joke, a prank, as if announcing a fake pregnancy, something emotionally loaded, something tied to her grief, is the same as putting salt in someone's coffee or hiding the TV remote. She doesn't cause a scene. She doesn't flip a table. She quietly leaves. She pays the entire bill from her car. She messages the guests and ends the night with more dignity than most people would be capable of. And her husband, he Ubers home and calls her humorless. He says she humiliated him. Let that sink in. After publicly lying about her body, her reproductive status, and dredging up something deeply painful, he feels humiliated. Not because of what he did, but because she didn't play along. Because she refused to be the butt of the joke at a dinner she paid for and planned. And now, his family is calling her cold. Because she didn't laugh. Because she didn't stand there and smile while being emotionally gutted in front of her loved ones. So, am I the asshole? Let's be clear. No, the writer is not the asshole. She showed grace, strength, and restraint in a moment where many would have exploded. She drew a boundary. She said no to being disrespected, and yes to protecting her own emotional well-being. There's nothing harmless about that joke. It wasn't funny. It was cruel. And it weaponized something deeply sensitive for a cheap laugh and even cheaper attention. A joke that triggers pain, humiliation, and past trauma isn't a joke. It's a violation. And if anyone is uncomfortable now, good. They should be. Because maybe next time they'll think twice before defending someone who finds humor in another person's grief. The writer was not cold, she was composed, she was not humorless, she was human. And above all, she was right to walk away. Am I the asshole for considering exposing my brother-in-law's inappropriate behavior while my husband is deployed? Let's start from the top. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about the kind of betrayal that crawls under your skin, one that leaves a scar even if no one sees it. The kind that makes your stomach twist when you're supposed to be celebrating one of the most beautiful moments of your life. The writer, a 27-year-old woman, is newly married, barely a year into what's supposed to be the beginning of forever. Her husband, 28, is serving overseas. A deployment is never easy. It's distance with 1,000 uncertainties layered on top. And just before he left, fate threw something bittersweet their way. They found out they're expecting their first child. It should have been a magical time, a time of nesting, of names, of little onesies folded neatly in drawers. Instead, she finds herself here, alone, vulnerable, and staring down a betrayal she never asked for. At first, everything seemed perfect. The writer shares the news with their families. She's pregnant. The excitement is there, warm and genuine. People are overjoyed. But then comes him, the younger brother. 25, always a little too friendly, always towing that invisible line between charming and inappropriate, but never quite crossing it. Until this morning. The writer wakes up to a message, not a congratulations, not a how are you feeling. No, it's a message that shifts the ground beneath her. It's a message laced with something dark, something disrespectful, something calculated. He says he understands how pregnancy can be emotionally and physically draining. He says he gets that intimacy might be rare right now, and then without hesitation, he offers himself, emotionally, physically, as if he's some kind of stand-in, a substitute husband. And just when you think it can't get worse, no one has to know. There it is, that single sentence that turns this from inappropriate to outright predatory, because this wasn't a clumsy joke. This wasn't a slip-up. It was deliberate. The writer is stunned, hurt, disgusted, not just for herself, but for what this means. This man, the brother-in-law, wasn't just crossing a boundary, he was bulldozing it. He knew her husband, his own flesh and blood, is thousands of miles away. He knew the writer was vulnerable, pregnant, and navigating everything alone. And yet, he saw opportunity. But now the writer faces a cruel dilemma. Does she tell her husband, who is serving overseas, already under the weight of unimaginable stress, and risk breaking his heart when he can't do a damn thing about it? Does she hold it in, wait for his return, and face the possibility that she'll seem like she hid something? Or does she say nothing at all and let this man walk away unscathed? And here's where it gets complicated, because this isn't just about a gross text message. This is about history. The writer's husband and his brother have been through hell together. They're bonded by more than blood. They've leaned on each other through hard times. The brother-in-law was the best man at their wedding. So to say this would destroy their relationship isn't an exaggeration, it's a guarantee. But let's be real. That bond, that loyalty, it should have meant something to him too. The writer is left carrying the weight of protecting her husband's heart while also protecting the dignity of her own. And she's pregnant, growing life inside her. And this is what she has to deal with. How is that fair? And what if she says nothing? What if the brother-in-law thinks this kind of thing is acceptable? What if he's done it before? What if he does it again? What if one day her child is old enough to see this man at family gatherings and she's forced to smile through gritted teeth, knowing what he did? There's no clean way out, no easy solution. Only pain, no matter which path she takes. So, am I the asshole? Let's be absolutely clear. No, the writer is not the asshole. She's in an impossible position. A woman trying to do right by her husband, her unborn child, and herself. She didn't ask for this. She didn't invite it. And the fact that she's even hesitating, thinking of the impact her truth might have on others, shows how deeply she cares. That's not weakness. That's strength. The brother-in-law? He crossed a line that should never be crossed, and not just once. With every word in that message, he doubled down on betrayal. He's not just disrespecting a marriage, he's threatening the foundation of trust in a family, and a family already stretched by distance and duty. The writer deserves safety, she deserves respect, and she deserves to be heard. There's no winning move here, only the courage to tell the truth and deal with the fallout, not because she wants to, but because someone has to. This wasn't just a betrayal, this was a choice, and it wasn't hers. So no, she's not the asshole, not even close. Am I the asshole for wanting to leave my wife after she gave birth to our son? Let's talk about what happens when love turns into wreckage. When the vows you've held close to your chest for 7 long years suddenly feel like paper soaked in gasoline, waiting for the smallest spark to destroy everything. The writer, a 34-year-old man, is standing at a crossroads no one wants to find themselves at. A father, a betrayed husband, and now, a man asking a question that cuts deep. Am I the asshole for wanting to walk away? 7 years of marriage. That's not nothing. That's not a fling or a phase. It's years of birthdays, holidays, quiet mornings, and ordinary Tuesdays. It's history. It's routine. It's choosing each other again and again until someone stops choosing. For the writer, that turning point came wrapped in devastation, a miscarriage, a loss heavy enough to shatter most people. But what followed was worse. Worse because it wasn't just grief, it was betrayal. His wife confessed to multiple affairs, not one, not two, but several spanning the last 4 years of their marriage. Imagine carrying grief and betrayal in the same breath. Imagine looking into the eyes of someone you once thought you'd grow old with and realizing they've been living a double life for more than half of your marriage. She begged for therapy, pleaded for another chance. But the writer, he couldn't do it. He moved out, and who could blame him? Still, separation is messy. Grief doesn't follow clean timelines. And sometimes, when the person you loved once pulls you close again, your heart forgets the wounds, even just for a moment. They slept together again. And then, she got pregnant. Suddenly, the writer is expecting a child with the same woman who shattered his trust. And to complicate it further, his job takes him 12 hours away, leaving them emotionally and physically distant for most of her pregnancy. She continued to hope, continued to call, continued to talk about reconciliation, but something inside him had changed, because time and space have a strange way of clarifying things. While he was away, the writer found something, or rather, someone new, a connection, a spark, something that felt real and untainted, a woman who knew the whole story, knew he was married, knew he had a baby on the way. And yet, the relationship grew. He says he truly feels love for her. And that isn't a light thing to say when you're still tangled in the aftermath of a broken marriage. Fast forward to the birth of his baby boy. The writer goes home. He's there, physically present, to witness the moment his child enters the world. A moment that should be pure, hopeful, a reset button. But instead, it's chaos. His wife, now a new mother, is pressing harder than ever for reconciliation. She's overwhelmed, perhaps desperate. She sees the birth of this child as their second chance. But the writer, he's already made up his mind. He tells her he still wants the divorce. And now, the grief, betrayal, and heartbreak begin to shift into blame. She accuses him of ruining their family, of walking away when she needed him the most. Let's pause here, because this is where the emotional weight of the story really settles in. This isn't just about a failed marriage. This is about two broken people trying to navigate a situation where everyone loses something. The writer feels the last 7 years of his life have been a lie, and maybe they were. Maybe not every day, but betrayal has a way of rewriting even the good memories. His wife feels abandoned. She's now a mother, likely sleep-deprived, emotional, and perhaps drowning in the weight of her own regrets. But whether those regrets came too late is not something she gets to control. The writer wants to co-parent. He's trying to be responsible. He doesn't want to disappear, but co-parenting with someone who's still emotionally clinging to a relationship that's already over, that's like trying to build a bridge while one side keeps setting fire to the foundation. And then there's the girlfriend, a woman who stepped into the writer's life at a time when he was unraveling. She knew the situation, accepted it, and stayed. To be clear, he hasn't told his wife about her. And while some may raise eyebrows at that, it's hard to ignore the bigger picture here. This man is done. Emotionally, mentally, romantically. But let's not pretend it's all clean cut. Love doesn't leave quietly. Even when it's broken, even when it's betrayed, it lingers, it whispers. What if? It claws at your ribs when you're trying to sleep, but does that mean he should stay? So, am I the asshole? Let's be brutally honest here. No, the writer is not the asshole for wanting to leave. He was betrayed, repeatedly. Over the span of 4 years, he gave more than most would. He came back, at least for a moment, and tried to navigate the wreckage. He stepped up for the birth of his child. He's not ghosting her, he wants to co-parent. His heart just moved on. And yes, it's complicated. Yes, emotions are high. Yes, it's devastating for his wife. But he is not responsible for fixing what she broke. Wanting peace isn't cruel. Wanting to rebuild your life doesn't make you heartless. In fact, the writer's decision to finally stand firm in what he wants, despite the guilt, the pressure, and the emotional mess, is probably the healthiest thing he's done for himself in years. This isn't about abandoning a family. It's about refusing to live in a lie for the sake of appearances. And if anything, that child deserves a father who is present and honest, not one silently drowning in resentment. So no, writer, you are not the asshole. You're just a man trying to untangle himself from years of pain and give yourself and your child a real shot at happiness. Am I the asshole for breaking up with my boyfriend after he said my pain during sex was hot to him? This one isn't easy to tell, and it shouldn't be, because what's at the center of this story isn't drama. It's fear, confusion, violation, and a heart-wrenching attempt to understand whether walking away from something that hurt you makes you the bad guy. So here we are, a young woman, the writer, trying to piece together what happened to her and whether her decision to break up with her boyfriend was justified or whether she's somehow overreacting. Let's start from the beginning. The writer wasn't looking for anything wild in the bedroom. She liked things simple, vanilla, as she described it. There's nothing wrong with that. There's comfort and connection, safety and boundaries. But lately her boyfriend had been pushing for more. Not conversations about experimenting, not mutual agreements, but actions, physical ones. He started pulling her hair, slapping her, putting his hands on her neck. And we're not talking about casual play. We're talking about cutting off her air to the point where she was passing out, and yet it got worse. During one of their most recent encounters, he turned her over, face down, and escalated things rapidly, pulling her hair, slapping her, and going fast, hard, and completely beyond anything they had ever mutually agreed to. She told him, "This hurts." And let's pause there, because this moment matters. This was her saying stop. This was her setting a boundary, a gap. This was her expressing pain clearly and directly. But what did he do? He ignored her. Worse, he went faster. He told her to say it again, to repeat that it hurt, because to him, her pain was hot. That's not a kink. That's not play. That's a total disregard for consent. That's abuse dressed up as experimentation. The writer tried to pull his hand away. She tried to shift her body, tried to get him to stop, but he pushed her back down, slammed her into the mattress, and he kept going. This wasn't miscommunication. This was force. And then when he said he was going to finish, he choked her again, put her in a headlock. She couldn't breathe. She began passing out again. He didn't stop until after he was done. The room fell silent. She rolled onto her back, dazed, confused, in pain. And what did he say? "That was so hot." Let that sit for a second, because that's the moment where everything broke. The writer, now raw and hurting, told him it was painful, that she didn't want it like that again. But instead of listening, instead of apologizing, instead of showing any empathy, he doubled down. He claimed that because she said yes to sex initially, and because she was moaning more than usual, he thought she liked it, that her lack of resistance meant she was okay with it. But that's not how consent works. Pain doesn't equal pleasure. Silence doesn't mean yes. And moaning doesn't override a clear, direct, "This hurts." The writer went to the shower, crying, still hurting, emotionally stunned, and when she came back out, he just walked away from her. No comfort, no concern, no acknowledgement of the pain he caused. She tried to explain how she felt, and instead of understanding, he called her inexperienced, told her she needed to get used to breath play, that he'd teach her. Teach her? What exactly is he teaching when he ignores a plea to stop? When he chokes someone unconscious and calls their pain hot? What lesson is being learned when your girlfriend is left shaking in the shower, crying and aching, and all you can say is, "You'll get used to it"? That's not education. That's manipulation. The writer finally said what needed to be said. We need to take a break. And here's where the guilt kicks in. He starts texting her, telling her not to throw it all away, saying they've built too much together, that it was all a misunderstanding, that she was just groaning and he thought she liked it, that the pain was just a small part of trying something new. But no, this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a violation. And just because she didn't scream or fight doesn't mean what happened wasn't deeply, fundamentally wrong. Because when someone says, "This hurts," and the other person says, "Good," that's not a misread signal. That's a red flag waving like a storm warning. Now, the writer hasn't gone back. She still has belongings at his place, but she hasn't returned. And honestly, that distance might be the only safe space she's had in this entire story. So now she's here asking the world, am I the asshole for breaking up with him? And to that, we say this, loud and clear. No, you are not the asshole. You are the survivor. You listened to your gut. You spoke up. You set a boundary. And when that boundary was ignored, when your pain was fetishized, dismissed, and used against you, you walked away. That takes strength. and clarity and courage. If anything, the fact that you're still questioning yourself shows how deeply this experience shook you. That's what abusers do. They make you doubt your voice, your pain, your worth. But don't let this story end in shame. Let it end in reclaiming your power, because you are not the villain here. You're someone who deserves love that listens, that stops when you say stop, that never ever finds pleasure in your pain. So no, you are not the asshole. You are someone who finally said, enough. Am I the asshole for not letting my parents join us for Mother's Day so they could meet and get to know my kids? This story doesn't start with Mother's Day. It doesn't start with a bouquet of flowers or a text message out of the blue. It starts decades ago in a home where a child, our writer, lived with two adults who happened to be his parents, but didn't act like it. He's a grown man now, 39 years old, with a wife and 4 children of his own, and a full life. A life built with intention, love, and a sharp understanding of what it means to be a parent. But that understanding didn't come from being shown. It came from surviving the absence of it. You see, the writer has been no contact with his parents for 20 years. Let that sink in. 2 full decades without a single real relationship, not just because of distance, but because of history. Painful history. Now, recently, that silence was interrupted. His parents reached out. A few messages, a polite reply or two from the writer, not out of invitation, but out of civility. That's all it was. But to his parents, that tiny crack in the door looked like a welcome mat. Suddenly, they were asking to meet, to visit, to spend Mother's Day together, to see their grandchildren, children they've never met. They offered to host, offered to come to his home. They wanted in, but the writer said no. And this is where the tension begins. He didn't scream, he didn't rage, he simply declined. But they didn't stop. The messages kept coming, all day, until finally he blocked them, closed the door again, not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. Now, before you rush to judgment, let's pause. Because stories like this, they always bring out the "but family is family" crowd, the ones who insist that blood erases all sins, that years of silence can be wiped clean with a hug over brunch, that it's Mother's Day should somehow overrule 2 decades of absence. But the writer, he remembers. And what he remembers is chilling. He was born to young parents, 19 and 20, and from the very beginning, he was made to feel like a burden. Not a child to be cherished, not a son to be nurtured, but a weight, an obligation. He wasn't hugged, wasn't cared for, wasn't fed consistently. There were days, entire days, where they wouldn't even speak to him. Let that settle in. A child, growing up in a home where his existence was treated as an inconvenience. No one checked if he ate. No one asked if he was sleeping. The only reason he made it to school was because someone taught him how to get to the bus stop alone. When he had homework problems, he was on his own. If there was a form that needed signing, he learned to forge their signatures, not because he was mischievous, but because he had no other choice. They just wouldn't do it. And then, when he was 14, everything changed. Not for him, but for them. That's when his parents had more children, and those children, they were wanted. Suddenly, these cold, distant people transformed, affectionate, attentive, loving. They played with his siblings, hugged them, took interest in their lives, helped with homework, tucked them in at night, and the writer, still there, watched it all happen. He wasn't included in the change, he was merely witness to it. They started talking to him a little more, asked him how school was going, but it was surface level, polite at best. He still couldn't come to them with real problems, still wasn't fed or guided or cared for in any meaningful way. They had become parents, yes, but not to him. And if that doesn't crack something inside you, it should. Because what we're looking at here isn't just neglect. It's selective parenting. A child was excluded from love in his own home, made to feel like an outsider in his own family. Years passed. He graduated alone. No conversations about the future. No help, no guidance, just silence. Eventually, the pain was too loud to ignore. The writer had a choice, accept them for what they were or cut ties, and he chose the latter, not out of vengeance, but because healing sometimes means refusing to reopen old wounds. And now, after all these years, they come back. Why? Because the children they did raise, his siblings, don't want kids. One or both of them have even taken permanent steps to remain child-free. And suddenly, now, the writer's children matter to them. Now, they're interested. Now they want back in. Not to apologize, not to repair, but to access the next generation. And he's being told by a relative, no less, that he's the one being selfish, that he's hurting his kids by not giving them a chance to know their grandparents. But what kind of grandparents are we talking about? The kind who ignored their own son? The kind who showed what love could have looked like and deliberately withheld it from him? The kind who only reached out when they realized they had no other route to grandchildren? So let's ask the real question. Is the writer the asshole for protecting his kids from the same pain he endured? Absolutely not. He's not cutting off opportunity. He's guarding peace. He's not being bitter. He's setting boundaries. And most importantly, he's not just thinking about himself. He's thinking about what it would mean to open that door, to expose his children to people who never showed an ounce of parenting when it truly mattered. This isn't about revenge. It's about choosing legacy over lineage. The writer is building something better for his kids than what he had. And if that means saying no to people who once abandoned him, then that's not cruelty. That's courage. So no, you are not the asshole. You're someone who survived what should have broken you. You learned what love looks like by studying the absence of it. And now you're determined to make sure your children never have to wonder if they matter. That's not heartless. That's being a damn good father. Am I the asshole for refusing to raise my ex-husband's child? This isn't just about saying no. It's about what that no carries. The weight of betrayal, the shadows of a broken marriage, and a line drawn not in cruelty, but in pain and survival. Let's rewind. Our writer, Tori, is 35. A mother, a woman who's done the hard work of moving forward after her marriage with Jeff, her ex-husband, fell apart. They share a son, Neo, who's now 10. But 5 years ago, Jeff made a choice to have an affair. And that affair, it wasn't just a fling. It resulted in a child, a little boy named Omar. Now let that settle in for a moment, because it's one thing to be cheated on. It's another to know that infidelity left behind a permanent reminder, a life, a child born from a betrayal. Jeff's relationship with Rebecca, the woman he had the affair with, crumbled when she decided to leave. 2 years ago, she walked away from it all. She left the country, abandoning her son, not just physically, emotionally, completely. She cut contact and never looked back. And suddenly, Jeff, the man who once betrayed the writer, is now showing up at her doorstep, child in tow, hoping she'll step in where Rebecca stepped out. Let's be honest, what Jeff is asking for isn't casual. It's not a quick favor. This isn't asking her to watch the kid for an hour while he runs an errand. He's asking her to be a mother, to take in a child that was the product of her deepest pain. And the writer, despite knowing Omar is innocent in all of this, refuses. Not because she hates the child, not because she lacks compassion, but because the sight of Omar is a wound that never really healed. And to invite him into her home, into her routine, into her heart, would be reopening it. Yet Jeff keeps pushing. He brings Omar during custody exchanges, sometimes with a packed bag, sometimes with wide eyes and heartbreaking innocence, whispering, "Mommy, take me too." And here's where this story cuts deep, because this child, Omar, doesn't know the weight he carries. He's not guilty of what his parents did. All he sees is another mother figure, a warm hand, a safe home, a brother he loves, and he wants in. But for the writer, it's not that simple. She's not a villain for setting a boundary. She's a woman who's trying to protect her peace. She's made it clear to Jeff, to her son Neo, even to herself in therapy, that her ex's life outside of their shared son is not hers to carry. She's raising Neo, and she's doing it well. So well, in fact, that Jeff himself called her a wonderful mother, but now he uses that as a reason to demand more of her, to extend that love to a child that isn't hers, not biologically, not emotionally, and not by choice. Let's talk about that word choice, because motherhood, real motherhood, isn't just biology. It's sacrifice, it's heart, it's intention. The writer chose to be a mother to Neo. She did not choose to be the fallout for her ex-husband's affair. And yet, here come the in-laws, whispering words like compassion, calling her heartless, criticizing her for taking Neo places and not bringing Omar along. as if love is something she can hand out like snacks, as if it's easy. But where were they when the writer was healing from betrayal? Where were they when she had to pick up the pieces of her broken marriage and raise a son in its wake? Where were they when Jeff's choices shattered the trust that once held their family together? Now suddenly, they want her to save the boy their son's mistress abandoned? The writer says no. And not because she's cruel, but because she knows herself. She knows her limits. She knows what it would mean to force a motherly bond she does not feel. She knows that pretending to love a child out of guilt isn't love, it's a lie. And the moment she stood her ground, they lashed out, called her names, painted her as cold. So she fired back with truth. If I had cheated and had a child with another man, would you accept that child as part of your family? And just like that, the room went quiet, because they knew the answer. And it wasn't yes. Here's the bottom line. This story is messy, painful, deep. It involves a child who deserves love, a woman who deserves peace, and a man who seems determined to blur the line between them. But our writer, she's not the asshole. She's a mother with a boundary, a woman with a scar that still aches, and a human being who refuses to pretend for the comfort of others. To her critics, it may look like coldness, but to those who've lived through betrayal, who've had to reclaim their power, it looks like strength. So no, you are not the asshole. You are someone who knows the cost of your heart and refuses to give it where it was never earned. Am I the asshole for calling off my wedding after finding out my fiancé never had the money he promised to contribute? This isn't just a story about money. This is about trust, about promises made with smiles and sweet words, then quietly broken behind your back. Let's begin with the writer, 33 years old. A woman who's built a career, a life, a sense of stability. She's not drifting through the world hoping someone will rescue her. No, she's grounded. She works in a demanding field, accounting, juggling over 40 clients. She's the kind of woman who doesn't just dream of a beautiful wedding, she plans it piece by piece with spreadsheets, receipts, and every ounce of effort it takes to bring that vision to life. And for 5 years, she'd been with someone she thought was her partner. A 32-year-old man who wore the mask of success. A lawyer. Someone who looked the part, played the role, and made promises. Big promises. The kind you build your future on. He proposed in March 2024. The plan was to marry in December 2025. Plenty of time, right? Plenty of time to prepare for what was supposed to be one of the most beautiful days of their lives. He promised to contribute 70% of the wedding expenses. Not just vaguely, he said he would transfer money directly into the writer's account every time she made a payment. And here's where the heartbreak quietly began. Because promise after promise, she paid. She covered the deposits, the vendors, the venue, everything. And he, not a cent, not a single coin. And still, she gave him grace. She reminded him gently, and each time he deflected with the same casual affection. Yes, baby, after work, like he was just too busy, like the money was coming, just delayed. But behind that delay was silence. Behind that silence, a lie. Let's sit with that for a moment. The writer trusted him. She's busy, overwhelmed, and buried in client work, but she believed that the man she loved, the man she was building a life with, would back her up. He didn't. It wasn't until they finally sat down face to face that the truth of truth emerged, and it hit like cold water. He didn't have the money. He never did. What he had was a plan to ask his parents. Maybe. Or dip into some income he hadn't earned yet. Maybe. But the savings he'd boasted about, the financial stability he'd paraded around like a badge of honor, fiction. It wasn't just that he was broke, it's that he knew from the start that he was lying. And he watched the writer spend $500,000 in local currency without lifting a finger to stop her. And now somehow he has the audacity to bring up her expenses. As if the wedding she was building, the event she was pouring her soul into, was somehow a burden she created. Let's be clear. This isn't about one fight. This isn't about money. This is about trust. It's about the kind of betrayal that doesn't come in screaming arguments. It comes in quiet neglect. In letting someone do all the work while you sit back and let them believe you're helping. So the writer did what many couldn't. She called it off. The wedding, the engagement, the relationship. Because what's the point of tying yourself to someone who's already shown you what partnership means to them? And yet, her parents told her to stay. They told her to go through with the wedding. Why? Because it had already been announced. Because extended family already knew. Because it might be embarrassing to walk it back. Embarrassing? Isn't it more embarrassing to walk into a marriage knowing the foundation is cracked, that the vows you're about to make are already empty? The writer feels heartbroken, used, fooled, and she has every right to, because when someone proposes, they're not just offering a ring. They're offering a future. They're promising to stand beside you, to carry the weight with you. Instead, this man watched her carry it all and said nothing. So is the writer the asshole for walking away? Absolutely not. She's not the villain here. She's the one who woke up. She saw the truth before the vows, before the legal papers, before she gave her whole life to someone who already proved they weren't ready. She protected herself. She chose honesty over pretense, and that takes courage. To the outside world, it might look like a canceled wedding, but to those who know better, it looks like a woman reclaiming her worth. It looks like freedom. You are not the asshole. You are someone who realized you were loving alone and finally chose to stop. Am I the asshole for basically crashing out at my mile over the gender of our baby? Pregnancy is supposed to be one of the most sacred personal journeys a person can go through. And for the writer, 26, married and 8 months pregnant, this was that moment, a first child, the joy, the anxiety, the dreams, the countless decisions shared with her husband, who at 32 stood firmly by her side. They weren't obsessed with whether it was a boy or a girl. All they wanted was a healthy, happy baby. And maybe, just maybe, a little surprise at the end. Something beautiful and unspoiled by expectations. That's where this all begins. The writer, deeply connected with her mother-in-law, had been open, even generous. She shared her progress, ultrasound pictures, updates, things many would keep close. She allowed her MIL into the process, believing this bond was a privilege and safe. But there's a thin line between excitement and entitlement, and her mother-in-law crossed it hard. As time went on, the MIL kept pressing. Have you found out yet? Changed your mind yet? The answer never changed. The writer and her husband were united. We want a surprise. Simple, respectful, clear. But all that clarity shattered in the middle of a damn supermarket aisle. Imagine this, you're 8 months pregnant, you're buying groceries, you're likely swollen, tired, maybe even dodging the usual any day now comments. And then strangers approach, smiling, congratulating you and your husband. Congratulations! A little boy. How exciting. Pause. What? The writer stood there stunned. She and her husband did not know the gender, and yet these mutual family friends were announcing it to her, like it was common knowledge. Where did they get this information? Her Mael told them, because she knew, because she found out, and she found out in the most unsettling way imaginable. Turns out the MIL had taken those ultrasound pictures, those deeply personal medical images, and handed them over to a friend in the medical field. This wasn't just nosy curiosity. This was an orchestrated breach of trust. She weaponized someone else's credentials to extract a secret the writer deliberately chose not to know. She didn't just peek behind the curtain, she tore it down and told the whole town what she found. And when confronted, did she apologize? Did she grasp the weight of what she'd done? No. She said, I just wanted to know, and I couldn't keep it to myself. There it is, that moment, the quiet shattering of everything. The disrespect, the entitlement, the absolute disregard for the writer's autonomy as a mother. So the writer reacted, and who wouldn't? She didn't scream or lash out irrationally. No. She passed the phone to her Memuel and expressed her deep disappointment. She set a boundary. She said, I don't want to see you for a while. That's not overreacting. That's grief. That's someone watching one of the last unspoiled moments of her pregnancy be ripped away because someone else couldn't respect her wishes. Her husband, 100% on her side. He cussed his mother out, not out of cruelty, but out of frustration, because this wasn't just a mistake. It was a violation. And yet, here come the in-laws. Suddenly, it's her who's the problem. The writer is being called the asshole by 2 sisters-in-law and 2 brothers-in-law. You shouldn't talk to her like that. She's very upset. It's not even that bad. But where was this energy when their mother betrayed a pregnant woman's trust? Where was the outrage when she shared a medical detail that wasn't hers to know, much less broadcast? Why is the pregnant woman the only one being blamed? And here's the irony. The husband, who also confronted her, gets zero backlash. Not one call, not one whisper of criticism. So this isn't just about what happened. It's about who they chose to attack. It's the age-old story of blaming the woman for having boundaries, for getting emotional, for protecting herself. The writer is now questioning herself. Maybe she did overreact, but let's be clear, she didn't explode. She didn't humiliate. She didn't cut anyone off permanently. She simply said, "This hurt me. I need space." That's not an overreaction. That's emotional maturity. Now, let's talk update. This happened in Australia, and while there are privacy laws, the AITAH, the writer isn't interested in legal battles. All she wants is peace, a calm before the storm of labor, a moment to enjoy the final stretch of pregnancy without drama or betrayal in the air. Her husband, being the supportive partner he is, has called a family meeting, a chance to confront this head on, a chance to get some clarity, or maybe some accountability. And he told the writer, it's your choice to attend, not pushing, not demanding, respecting her voice after someone else stole it. So now, as the baby grows and the due date approaches, the writer sits with this heartbreak, with the knowledge that something magical was taken from her and that not everyone will see that theft for what it was. But you know what? She still has her voice, her partner. And if anyone's wondering whether she's the asshole, absolutely not. She is a mother who was violated, disrespected, and then blamed for reacting like a human being. She set a boundary, and anyone who can't respect that, they're the ones who need to rethink what family means. Am I the asshole for flying home after my boyfriend drunkenly peed in my suitcase? There are moments in life when you stop and think, how did I end up here? And for the writer, 24 years old, visiting her boyfriend in another state, that moment hit her in the middle of the night, midnight to be exact, when the room was dark, quiet, until suddenly it wasn't. This trip was supposed to be a sweet reunion. They'd only been dating a few months, but things felt good, promising. Her boyfriend, 30, had just moved away for work, and she made the effort, booked the flight, and came to visit him for the week. That's commitment. That's care. But then Sunday night happened. She was jolted awake, not by a soft whisper, not by a late-night cuddle, but by the sound of the TV crashing to the floor. She looked over, and what she saw next was something out of a fever dream. Her boyfriend, standing in the corner of the room, back turned facing the wall, like a child in timeout. Only he wasn't sulking or being shy. He was peeing into her suitcase. Her suitcase. The same suitcase she used to pack her clothes, her toiletries, her entire week of belongings. The same suitcase she carefully filled so she could be near him, and he was urinating in it like it was a toilet. She yelled. Of course she did. Who wouldn't? But he was completely out of it. And as the lights flipped on, the surreal scene got worse. He looked dazed, confused, lost. He claimed he had no idea what he was doing. And then the vodka. Nearly an entire bottle, gone. And the writer doesn't drink. Not at all. Her last relationship was with an alcoholic, and the trauma of that still lives in her. She had been clear, painfully clear, that heavy drinking was a boundary, and up until that moment, her boyfriend had respected it. Or at least she thought he had. But boundaries mean nothing to a bottle when the person holding it doesn't care. He insisted he'd clean up, that he'd wash her clothes immediately, and maybe part of her wanted to believe it was just a bizarre, drunken mistake. So she let him, and she tried to sleep. But in the morning, reality set in. She found him passed out on the couch, her suitcase still soaked, the issue unresolved, her hurt ignored. She tried to talk, again and again, but he wouldn't sit up, wouldn't engage, wouldn't even look at her properly. At that point, something inside her cracked, so she started packing. What she could salvage went into a backpack. Everything else, a ruined mess. And she gave him a choice. Talk to me, or I'm leaving. And he chose silence. As she reached the door, he finally stirred. Are you serious? And yes, she was. This wasn't just about urine in a suitcase. This was about everything underneath it. The betrayal, the lies, the indifference. The ghost of her past relationship creeping back in when she least expected it. She left. She walked to a nearby Starbucks, heart pounding, hands probably still shaking, called her mom, her best friend, and booked the next flight home. And what did he text her? After all that? All right then. All right then. After everything? Now, with a clearer head, he says he was too drunk to remember, that it wasn't fair for her to leave before he sobered up. But let's talk about fairness. Was it fair to violate a known boundary? Was it fair to dismiss her pain again and again when she tried to talk? Was it fair to let her walk out without lifting a finger to stop her, only to act confused later? This wasn't about a one-time accident. It was about the complete lack of accountability, about the echoes of a trauma she thought she'd left behind. So now she's asking the internet, am I the asshole? And here's the truth. No, she's not. She protected herself. She recognized the signs early. She gave him chances to talk, to explain, to show he cared. And when he chose to ignore them, she chose herself. In a world where too many people stay in cycles that hurt them, the writer walked away. And that's not being the asshole. That's being brave. Am I the asshole for refusing to pay my cousin after he said wedding photography was his gift to us? Weddings. They're supposed to be about joy, about love, about two people starting the rest of their lives together, surrounded by the people who matter most. But sometimes it's not the strangers who shake your foundation, it's the ones closest to you. The writer had recently gotten married, one of life's most treasured milestones. Emotions were high, excitement even higher, and like many couples trying to pull off a wedding without drowning in debt, they had to make choices. One of those choices? Photography. Now here's where things took a turn. The writer's cousin is a professional wedding photographer. That's his job. He's not some guy with an iPhone and a filter pack. This is what he does. And when he approached the writer and offered to photograph the wedding as a gift, it felt like a beautiful gesture. Family helping family. A show of love, support, and generosity. But the writer and their partner didn't want to impose. They explicitly told him they didn't want him to feel obligated or burdened with work during a weekend that was supposed to be a celebration. And he insisted. He said he was happy to do it. That should have been the end of it, right? So the wedding comes and goes. The photos are taken. The memories are captured. The writer and their spouse tag his business in every social media post. They publicly thank him. They even send a personal thank you note for both his presence and the photography. Cue a few months later. The dust has settled, the honeymoon glow is fading, and the cousin reaches out, and instead of small talk or a warm memory, he hits them with a bill, $3,000. According to him, the real gift was squeezing them into his busy schedule. Let that sink in. Not the photos, not his time on the day, not the editing or delivery. The gift, apparently, was making space for them on his calendar. Everything else, well, that was standard business, and he now expected full payment. $3,000, after the fact, after calling it a gift. The writer is shocked, understandably. They didn't allocate money for photography because they were told not to. And this wasn't a simple misunderstanding of tone or a vague promise. They had several conversations about it. They were told he was happy to do it, that it was his gift to them. It wasn't just a verbal agreement. It was layered with emotion, with trust, with that unspoken expectation that when family says something like that, they mean it. And now he's calling them greedy, disrespectful, saying they don't value his work. Let's pause right here, because this isn't just about photography anymore. This is about a broken promise disguised as a favor. This is about weaponizing generosity for a payout. The writer's parents are urging them to just pay him off in installments to keep the peace. But that peace comes at a price, a literal one, $3,000. But more than that, it comes at the cost of self-respect, of boundaries, of the right to say, no, you can't rewrite the terms after the fact and expect me to foot the bill. And here's the truth. This isn't a business transaction. This was a wedding gift. At least, that's how it was offered. If the cousin had said from the beginning, I'll give you a discount or I'll charge you later, then the writer could have planned, budgeted, and maybe even chosen someone else. But he didn't. He changed the rules after the game was over. So now the writer's asking, am I the asshole for standing my ground? And the answer is a resounding no. This isn't about being greedy. It's about being honest. The writer trusted their cousin's word. They believed the offer was sincere. And that trust, it was shattered. Not by a mistake, but by a calculated reversal. You don't hand someone a wrapped gift and then months later show up with an invoice. So no, writer, you are not the asshole. You're someone who's learning the hard way that even family can sometimes treat you like a client when the moment suits them. And standing your ground now, it might be the first act of peace you give yourself. Would love to know, has anything like this ever happened to you? Let me know in the comments. Am I the asshole for not telling my ex about a life-changing illness? 16 years. 16 years of marriage, of building a life, of raising kids, of being we. Until one day, he wasn't part of that we anymore. The writer had her world split in two when her husband, after nearly 2 decades, had an affair with a coworker and left. He didn't just leave a marriage, he left a partner, a household, and the version of the future they built together. Just like that. But here's the part that says everything about the kind of person the writer is. Even after that betrayal, she chose peace. She chose grace. She stayed amicable. She pushed her pain aside, buried her heartbreak beneath layers of strength because she had 2 kids who still needed both of their parents. And for 8 years, she kept it together. Now her children are 18 and 20, grown or close enough to it. Her youngest still lives with her. Taking time, figuring out life, deciding between college or trade school, she's still there, still providing, still quietly being the backbone. And then comes the diagnosis. Epilepsy. A word that carries uncertainty, fear, 1,000 what-ifs in a single breath. The kind of diagnosis that forces you to reckon with your own mortality, whether you're ready or not. But true to form, the writer handled it with calm. She got on medication, followed the plan, crossed her fingers, and carried on, like she always has, until her son, without drama or fanfare, casually mentioned it to his dad. And just like that, the ex came roaring back in, not with concern, not with compassion, but with rage. He called the writer, yelling, claiming he had a right to know, that she had somehow wronged him by not calling him up the minute she left the neurologist's office. But did she? Let's zoom out here. This man walked away. He made his choices. He chose a new partner, a new life, and in many ways a new family. And the writer, she moved on. She rebuilt herself, quietly, without dragging him through her grief, her recovery, or her healing. And now, years later, he wants to insert himself back into her private medical decisions. Why? Because of some outdated sense of entitlement? Let's be clear. This isn't about their children being young or dependent. They're adults. The writer has no legal or moral obligation to inform her ex of anything regarding her personal health. But more than that, where was this energy when she was picking up the pieces he left behind? Where was this urgency when she was mourning the death of the life they had built? Because let's not pretend this is about the kids. This is about control, about a man who once made the decision to leave and now wants to act like he's still owed access to the parts of her life he gave up. The writer didn't hide her diagnosis. It wasn't some deep secret. She simply didn't prioritize informing someone who no longer plays an intimate role in her day-to-day life. And that's not selfish, that's boundaries. And here's something for the viewers to sit with. Just because someone used to be a main character in your story doesn't mean they get lifetime backstage access. The writer has already given this man more grace than most would. She made sure the co-parenting worked. She kept the peace. But when it comes to her own health, her own journey, that is hers alone. So, am I the asshole for not telling him right away? Absolutely not. She's a human being with autonomy. She's a mother who's still showing up, and she's allowed to protect her peace, even from the people who think they're entitled to it. Let's open this one up. Do you think she owed him that call? Or was this another example of someone trying to claim emotional rights they gave up years ago? Let me know your take in the comments. Am I the asshole for refusing to change my children's school after my husband's ex lost her high-paying job? This story begins like many blended family stories do, with the best of intentions. The writer is a 42-year-old mother of two. Her daughter is 16, her son 12. She's remarried now to Greg, a 44-year-old man with two children of his own, a 15-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter. Two separate lives, two separate histories, brought together under one roof in hopes of building something new. But the past, it doesn't just disappear, especially when children and exes are involved. The writer met Greg at their children's school, which in a way makes this all the more complicated. That school, the one where their lives first crossed paths, is now at the center of a deeply emotional standoff. Let's lay this out. The writer and her ex, Danny, co-parent effectively, even though, to be blunt, they don't like each other much. That doesn't matter. What matters is their shared goal, providing their children the best life possible. That means private education, that means college funds. And thanks to Danny's deep pockets and generous grandparents on both sides, those things are secured. Now enter Greg. He and his ex, Leah, had a similar agreement for as long as both parties could financially contribute. But recently, Leah lost her high-paying job, and with that loss, Greg's kids were suddenly pulled out of their prestigious international school and placed elsewhere. Understandably, they're struggling with the change. Resentment is starting to fester. Here's where the real fracture begins. Greg is asking the writer to change her children's school. Not for their benefit, not because it would improve their lives, but to make things fair for his children who are now dealing with the sting of inequality. The writer, she draws a line. She refuses to compromise her kids' education. And honestly, who could blame her? We're not talking about frivolous luxuries here. We're talking about their future. She and her ex have spent years planning, investing, committing to these opportunities. Changing that on a whim just to make another child feel better is not only unfair, it could irreparably damage her children's trust in her. And let's be clear, her children would notice. Imagine being a 16-year-old, pulled from your school, your friends, your path to college, not because of anything you did wrong, but because your mother's new husband wanted to level the playing field. That kind of decision, it doesn't fade with time. It leaves a scar, one that says your progress was negotiable. Let's also talk about power dynamics. The writer isn't some solo decision maker here. She has a co-parent, a very involved co-parent. If she even tried to unilaterally shift her children's educational path, Danny would take her to court without hesitation. He has the means, the resolve, and most painfully, the influence over their kids. He could turn them against her, make them question her loyalty. That's not just a legal risk, it's a risk to her relationship with her own children. Now, Greg is hurt. He's sleeping in a different room. He's calling her rigid, too tough, and maybe he's not entirely wrong to feel conflicted. His kids are hurting too. They're seeing an imbalance, and as kids do, they're interpreting it as unfairness. That's real. That's valid. But here's the bitter truth. Life is not always fair. And in blended families, where exes, income disparities, and parenting philosophies collide, fair is a luxury, not a guarantee. The writer never promised equality across households. She only promised love, stability, and her best efforts. That has to be enough. She admits it's tearing her apart. She loves Greg. She didn't marry him thinking their differences would fracture the home they built, but this is her hill. And if she has to lose him to protect her children's future, then so be it. That's the kind of resolve only a parent can understand. This post is not about being an ice queen. It's not about being selfish. It's about the brutal choices that come with being a mother. She's not compromising her children's future to smooth over someone else's hardship. Not when she didn't cause it. Not when there are other ways to support those kids without tearing down the ones already standing tall. So, am I the asshole for refusing to change my children's school? Absolutely not. This is a story about prioritizing your children, even when your heart is pulled in other directions. It's about standing your ground in the face of emotional pressure. And it's about knowing that love sometimes requires sacrifice, but that sacrifice should never come at the cost of your kid's future. Let's open it up. Do you think the writer made the right call, or is this one of those moments where love should trump logic, even if it comes at a cost? Let me know what side of the line you'd fall on. Am I the asshole for telling my adult son that his girlfriend, who happens to be a different race, has terrible body odor? This is not one of those stories with villains and heroes. This is one of those deeply awkward, socially complicated moments where everything hinges on how something is said, not just what is said. Let's set the stage. The writer is a 45-year-old mother who's trying to navigate a very delicate situation. Her 22-year-old son has a new girlfriend, 26, Korean American, seemingly kind, sweet, and outwardly everything a parent would hope their child finds in a partner. But there's a problem, one that's hard to ignore and even harder to bring up. According to the writer, the girlfriend has noticeable body odor. Specifically, she smells like armpits all the time. And this isn't some flippant observation. The writer is self-aware. She admits up front, "I stink when I sweat a lot." She knows this isn't about race or stereotypes. In fact, she emphasizes that she doesn't believe any race smells worse than another. She even points out that she's never even heard of such a stereotype involving Korean people. This, she insists, is just a human hygiene issue. But let's be honest, this is where the road gets bumpy. Because body odor? That's one of the most intensely personal topics anyone can bring up. And when it's directed at someone your child is dating, someone they likely love or are at least deeply infatuated with, it becomes not just personal, but volatile. The writer, unsure of what to do, doesn't approach the girlfriend directly. That's important. Instead, she tries to talk to her son, quietly, privately, one-on-one, the way a lot of parents might. Her tone isn't cruel, she says. She's not trying to shame this young woman. She's trying to raise a concern discreetly. But her son, he explodes, accuses her of being racist. Suddenly, the conversation stops being about armpits. It becomes a full-blown cultural landmine. And this is where the emotional tension kicks in. Was the writer truly out of line? Or did the son, perhaps feeling defensive or protective, misread her intention? Was it the delivery, the context? Or are some topics just too explosive to touch, no matter how delicately they're handled? Here's where it gets tricky, because the writer swears she didn't mean anything racial. She even claims she was blindsided by her son's reaction. And that's where many viewers are going to feel the tension, intent versus impact. The writer might not have meant to offend, but did her words still land in a way that felt like an attack? We also need to acknowledge the generational divide here. What the writer sees as a practical concern, a hygiene issue, her son might view through a lens of cultural sensitivity, a sense that his girlfriend is being othered or unfairly judged. And if we dig a little deeper, this might not just be about body odor at all. It might be about boundaries, about how much input a parent gets to have in their adult child's romantic life. Because for the son, this wasn't a gentle observation, it was a judgment. Not just of his girlfriend, but of his own choices. That kind of thing stings. And once the word racist enters the room, there's no going back. The entire conversation changes shape. The emotions become amplified, even if the original message came from a place of concern. So now the writer is left reeling, wondering if she crossed a line, or if she's simply paying the price for trying to be honest in a world that punishes awkward truths. Am I the asshole for telling my adult son that his girlfriend smells bad? Here's where it gets raw. No, I don't think the writer is an asshole, but I do think this was one of those situations where no one could come out clean. The topic is just too personal, too emotionally loaded, and yes, too vulnerable. Even the best intentions can come off harsh when you're dealing with someone your child cares about. That said, the accusation of racism adds another layer of pain, and whether or not it was fair, it's a sign that the son felt something deeper was being implied, even if the writer didn't see it that way. It's not about what you meant, it's about what the other person heard. This story reminds us that sometimes the truth, even if it smells a little, isn't always welcome. And some conversations, no matter how gently wrapped, are simply too sensitive to survive the delivery. So now I want to hear from you. Was the writer wrong to speak up? Should she have just let it go? Or is there ever a good way to bring up something this personal? Because at the end of the day, when it comes to love, identity, and family, what's more important, honesty or harmony? Am I the asshole for telling my mother-in-law she made her choice by keeping my husband's ex around? Let's rewind this messy clock. Our writer, a 33-year-old Indian-American woman, and her husband Tom, 35, have been no contact, and I mean absolute radio silence, with most of his family for the last 3 years. Not just out of spite, no petty arguments, no fleeting family drama, but because of one person. Talia. Talia, the golden girl, the ex, the one who never seemed to leave. Not from the family photos, not from holiday dinners, and apparently not from the mother-in-law's heart either. Now, here's where it begins to sting. Talia wasn't just any ex. She was the mother-in-law's best friend's daughter, a small-town sweetheart who grew up under the warm glow of family approval. She fit the mold, traditional, sweet, probably brought the right casserole to every dinner. She was the daughter mother-in-law always wanted. Yes, those were her actual words. To top it off, writer makes a sharp note. Tom has a sister. So, was Talia really more like a daughter, or just more like a mirror reflecting what Mill wanted her son to marry? Ryder and Tom, meanwhile, met in college. There wasn't even a spark at first. It was slow, real, platonic even, until it wasn't. Tom broke things off with Talia before dating Ryder. That's important. There was no cheating, no betrayal, just a shift. But apparently that shift cracked the foundation Mill built her fantasy life on, because ever since Tom and Talia split, Mill never let go. Talia stayed in the picture, not just awkwardly lingering. She was at every family function, holidays, get-togethers, all of it. And the entire time she treated Ryder with that icy, too sweet to be real tone. You know the kind, the compliments with daggers hidden in them. And then came the wedding, not one, but two, a beautiful union that blended cultures, tradition, and family. But for Talia, it was her stage. At the Indian ceremony, where red is a sacred bridal color, Ryder wore a stunning red lehenga and sari. What did Talia wear? An eggshell dress, essentially off-white. White in Indian culture symbolizes mourning and purity, typically worn at funerals. Strike one. But she didn't stop there. At the American ceremony, where the dress code clearly forbade red, Talia showed up in a fiery, floor-length red gown with a slit up to her thigh. Not only was it a bridesmaid dress, it screamed disrespect. This wasn't fashion, this was a statement, one meant to provoke. Tom and his sister asked her to change. She did, but the damage had been done, and trust me, the aunties were watching. As if the gossip wasn't already swirling like smoke from a fire, Talia turned to tears and ran to Mimiel, who, instead of acknowledging her behavior, approached Ryder and said the now infamous line, "Keep your kind in line." Pause. Breathe. Let that sink in. This wasn't just tone deaf. This was a straight-up dagger. Ryder had every reason to lose it, but she didn't. She responded with composure and fire, calling out Talia's blatant disrespect and standing her ground. And then came the tipping point. Talia made a sob story post on social media, twisting the truth into something pitiful. She was exiled because the bride was jealous. Ryder fired back, receipts in hand, tagging Miel and declaring once and for all, this is done. The line was drawn. Respect us or stay out of our lives. Miel agreed for a while, but snakes don't stay in the grass for long. 3 years later, Talia showed up again at Thanksgiving, which, by the way, Ryder was hosting. With a pie and a grin, she waltzed in like nothing happened. And when Ryder slammed the door in her face, Mill had nothing but excuses. That's when Tom, her baby boy, stood firm, told his own mother she had chosen Talia over him, over his family. The door closed, literally and metaphorically. Now here's where it gets complicated. 3 years pass, no contact, but Ryder and Tom now have twin boys. And suddenly, miraculously, Mill wants back in. She sends a text from an unknown number, begging for a second chance, promising to keep Talia away this time, claiming she's barely in contact with her anymore, though her Facebook tells another story. Ryder's response is cold but honest. You made your choice. And really, she did. Miel chose the person who disrespected her son's wife, who crashed their wedding like a soap opera villain, who insulted her daughter-in-law's culture over and over again. And now, because there are grandchildren, MIL wants to rewrite history, brush off a decade of tension as a misunderstanding. You don't get to hit rewind just because the family tree grew another branch. But still, Ryder is human. She feels the weight of this. MIL always wanted to be a grandma. Her other sons don't have kids. Even her own daughter went no contact. The door isn't just closed, it's locked from every side. Ryder wonders, am I being cold? Am I robbing someone of joy? But there's a truth buried under all this drama. Boundaries aren't cruel, they're protection. Ryder isn't building a wall. She's reinforcing a fence that was repeatedly broken down by disrespect, manipulation, and entitlement. So, am I the asshole for telling my mother-in-law she made her choice? No. No, Ryder. You are not. You're not being harsh. You're being honest. You're not gatekeeping love. You're guarding peace. And let's be real, if Emil had chosen respect over nostalgia, chosen her actual family over a fantasy, she wouldn't be standing outside the gate now, asking for a key she tossed away years ago. Arsh, am the asshole. I refused to foot the $500 dinner bill for my high school friend group, and now they've excommunicated me. Am I the asshole? It started like one of those dreamy weekends teens romanticize. Tents, road trips, junk food, and the illusion that everyone's bonded for life. The writer and their group of high school friends planned a weekend getaway, complete with camping and impromptu adventures. Nothing fancy, just vibes and good company. But that illusion, it started cracking the second they rolled up to the restaurant. Now to set the scene, the writer's group is made up of high school students, not college kids with part-time jobs, not professionals with bank accounts. These are teens, broke, dreaming big, and still figuring out what a mortgage even is. So when two friends decided it would be fun to dine at an upscale restaurant, it sent a ripple of anxiety through the group. A fancy place with mood lighting, leather menus, and as the writer soon discovered, a strict, only three-way bill split policy. Already a red flag. The writer, being the responsible one, and let's be real, probably the only one thinking with their wallet, asked the waitress up front about how the check could be split. And just like that, the mood turned. The friends got annoyed. Annoyed at who? The writer? For asking a completely reasonable question, just because they didn't want to be blindsided when the tab dropped like a bombshell? That should have been warning sign number 2. Now remember, the writer ordered one single meal, a modest $26 dish. That's it. Meanwhile, Amanda decided to go full banquet mode, ordering 6 appetizers because she hadn't eaten all day. The rest of the crew, high rollers in disguise, casually ordering $45 set meals like it wasn't a problem. It was becoming a financial ambush. And then came the real kicker. Amanda was placed in writer's payment group when they decided to split the check 3 ways. That meant the bill for just 5 people ballooned to $500. And Amanda? Well, surprise, surprise, suddenly she forgot her card but could Venmo or Zelle, just not actually pay right now. Cue the guilt tripping. The others, instead of checking their own behavior, pressured the writer to pay the entire $500 because they had a physical card on them, as if that somehow made them the designated bank. As if being the most responsible person in the room was a weakness to be exploited. And here's the devastating part. The writer knew. They knew. These people had a track record of forgetting to pay back borrowed money. The kind of friends who ghost you over $10, who shrug off debt with a laugh and a shrug. Small items, big bills, it didn't matter. The money just vanished. And this time it wasn't a soda or a movie ticket. This was $500. The writers stood their ground. They didn't shout. They didn't cause a scene. They offered a solution. Here's $46 for my meal and a bit extra for the tip. Someone else can cover the rest with Apple Pay. Totally fair, completely reasonable. But instead of understanding, they called the writer cheap. They mocked them, because in their entitled little world, saying no made you the villain. Fast forward a week and a half, and the social fallout hit. One of the friends hosted a party. The writer wasn't invited. Their twin brother was. The message? Crystal clear. They weren't just iced out, they were excommunicated. And here's where the heartbreak sets in. The writer loved these people. They tried to be accepted. They tried to be the good friend, the one who showed up, paid the tab, covered when others fell short. They weren't just left out, they were discarded. Like their kindness, their loyalty, their presence didn't matter at all. But here's where the story shifts. Graduation's around the corner. A fresh start, new cities, new people. No more being the convenient friend. No more bending over backwards just to be liked by those who never really cared in the first place. So, am I the asshole for refusing to pay for a $500 meal I barely touched? Let's be honest, Not even close. This wasn't about money. This was about boundaries, about self-respect, about standing up in the face of peer pressure and saying, no, I will not be taken advantage of again. That takes courage. That takes backbone. And if those so-called friends couldn't see the value in that, then good riddance, because the writer deserves better. Would you have paid, or would you have walked away too? Let me know in the comments, and to the writer, wherever you're going next, I hope it's somewhere filled with people who actually see you, not your wallet. Arsh, am the asshole. I said no to paying my little brother's tuition after years of being ignored by my own family. Now I'm the villain? Sometimes it's not one big betrayal that breaks you. It's a lifetime of quiet ones, giftless birthdays, forgotten holidays, fake smiles, and whispered jokes meant to humiliate. That's the kind of childhood the writer had to navigate. And now in adulthood, that same family, the ones who never showed up for her, want her to show up for them. Let's rewind. The writer is a 22-year-old woman who grew up with a title no kid ever asks for, the family black sheep. But not because she rebelled, not because she lashed out. No, she earned that branding simply for noticing. For calling out the unfairness when her siblings got shiny new toys while she got a card, or a vague promise to buy something later, which, shocker, never happened. Even back then, the writer could feel it, that unspoken divide. The way her siblings were doted on while she was expected to be quiet, grateful, invisible. And when she did speak up, she was ungrateful, too loud, the difficult one, the one her mom would humiliate during family gatherings, always under the guise of a joke. Imagine growing up in a house where your presence is treated like a burden. But the writer didn't crumble. She didn't let that kind of upbringing rot her from the inside. At 16, she got a part-time job, and by sheer force of will, she clawed her way to independence. She landed a decent corporate job. Nothing extravagant, but enough to move out and finally breathe. She shares an apartment, takes small trips, treats herself to a nice meal every now and then. After all those years of neglect, that kind of peace is revolutionary. And here's where the past comes knocking. Out of nowhere, her mother calls, suddenly warm, asking about work, reminiscing about when the writer used to smile more. A classic manipulation tactic wrapped in nostalgia and guilt. And then came the real reason for the call, her younger brother. He got into college, but not just any college, the expensive one, the one where all his friends are going. He's throwing a tantrum because, well, of course he is. He's used to getting his way. And now, according to the mother, it's the writer's turn to give. After years of being pushed aside, ignored, mocked, suddenly she's family again, but only because they want something. And here's the part that truly stings. Her mom dismissed the writer's current expenses. Rent, groceries, those aren't real responsibilities in her eyes. Because apparently, unless you're married with kids or in debt up to your eyeballs, your struggles don't count. Still, the writer didn't explode. She didn't scream. She said she wasn't in a place to help. She was polite, calm, mature. She even followed up with a message explaining herself, acknowledging the years of unfair treatment, but making it clear she wasn't being spiteful, just honest. And how did her family respond? 14 missed calls, texts, guilt trips. Her father, usually silent, joined in. Her brother took to social media, calling her bitter, ungrateful, and heavily implying that she was heartless and selfish. His latest post even called her a bitter bitch. That's what family means to them. Not loyalty, not love, but obligation. And if you dare to say no, you're the villain in their story. Now the writer is left reeling, wondering if she was too harsh, doubting herself because everyone is against her. Extended family, family friends, even distant cousins are reaching out, all echoing the same tired line, but he's your brother, but it's family. Here's the thing though, family is not a free pass to use someone. Family isn't supposed to mean you owe us everything while we give you nothing. And let's talk about the brother for a second. He's not some innocent child caught in the crossfire. He's a young adult who knows exactly what's going on. And instead of privately processing disappointment, he dragged his sister online, publicly, mocked her, painted her as cruel, and he expects money from her. That's not love, that's entitlement. So now the writer faces a choice, not about the money, that decision is already made, but about her peace. Because it's hard, So incredibly hard to say no to people who raised you, even when they treated you like nothing. It's hard to untangle yourself from that web of guilt, shame, and misplaced loyalty. But she did it. She said no. And for that, she's not just not the asshole, she's brave. So what do you think? Would you sacrifice your financial security for a family that never showed up for you? Or would you do what the writer did? Finally stand your ground after a lifetime of being pushed to the sidelines? Let me know in the comments. And to the writer, whatever comes next, I hope it's a life full of genuine love, earned respect, and people who see your worth without needing you to fund it. Am the asshole. My brother-in-law drank my breast milk like it was a party shot. I called it disgusting. Now I'm the bad guy? Some moments are so bizarre, so absurd, that they leave you sitting in silence thinking, did that really just happen? This story? Yeah, it's one of those. Let's dive in. The writer, a 29-year-old woman, made the thoughtful 3-hour drive with her husband and their 8-month-old baby to celebrate her father-in-law's birthday. A weekend with the in-laws, nothing too wild, just a cozy family gathering, laughter, a few shared meals, and as always for new moms, a whole lot of managing baby needs on the side. Now, for anyone who's been through it, or even just witnessed it, the early months of motherhood are no joke. Your body's still healing, your sleep's a distant memory, and everything you do revolves around keeping this tiny human alive. So when the writer says she's pumping breast milk during the day, let's pause and appreciate the effort that takes. It's not just pumping, it's scheduling, prepping, cleaning equipment, making sure it's stored correctly, and constantly worrying if there's enough. It's physical and emotional labor. So the writer did what so many moms do on the go. She brought a small cooler pack, stored the milk carefully, and made it through the long, hot day outdoors. But by the time they got back to the house, something was off. The milk smelled weird, likely spoiled from the heat, and she made the responsible choice, throw it out. She set it aside by the sink, started prepping formula, and focused on feeding her crying baby while her husband tried to help calm the little one. And then it happened. Out walks her brother-in-law, Josh, 28, armed with shot glasses, and with a grin on his face, he pours out the pumped milk, her milk, and starts offering shots like it's some frat party dare. Her husband refuses and pours it out. But Josh, he downs it in front of everyone, and they all just laughed. Let that sink in. A woman's breast milk meant for her infant child turned into a punchline at a family party, and she couldn't even react in the moment. She was feeding her baby, doing her job as a mother, sitting there, powerless, while the very thing her body created for her child became a joke. But once her baby was fed and calm, the writer had had enough. She confronted Josh. She called it disgusting. She voiced exactly what so many would have felt in her shoes. Violated, humiliated, and frankly, furious. And how did the family respond? It was just a joke. You're overreacting. It's not like he stole from the baby. Her husband, her in-laws, all of them, tried to downplay what happened, brushing it off as harmless, fun, something to just laugh about. Even her mother-in-law chimed in with the dismissive, it was going to go to waste anyway. Let's get real for a second. This wasn't about milk. This wasn't about waste. This was about disrespect. Breast milk isn't just another beverage. It's something deeply personal. It's tied to a mother's identity, her bond with her child, her physical effort, her sacrifice. You don't just pour it into a shot glass for entertainment. You don't. And what's worse, the writer was left feeling like she ruined the trip. Her husband gave her the cold shoulder for standing up for herself, for expecting a basic level of decency. Imagine how isolating that must feel, being the only one in a room who's disturbed by what just happened, while everyone else laughs and makes you feel like the problem. Now, credit to the writer, she didn't just lash out and walk away. She took a breath. She called her father-in-law and apologized for her reaction. He at least was understanding and even apologized himself for not stepping in. That moment, it shows that this wasn't about holding grudges. It was about setting boundaries, asking for respect, and being heard. She even sent the post to her husband, hoping he'd take a moment to reflect. Not to be right, but to be understood. Because when your partner doesn't have your back in a moment like this, that stings in a way words can't fully capture. As for Josh, She's not planning revenge. No bib for Christmas. No passive-aggressive digs. Just a promise that when she's ready, she'll talk to him. Like an adult. Like a person who deserves to be treated with respect. And to those questioning if this is fake or karma farming, the writer said it best. What would she even do with Reddit karma? This isn't some scripted drama. This is a woman trying to navigate the complicated mess that is family dynamics, motherhood, and basic dignity. So, is she the asshole? No, not even close. The truth is, she showed more composure than most of us would have. This wasn't about a glass of spoiled milk. It was about boundaries, about being heard, about not having to defend why something so personal, so tied to her motherhood, should not be treated like a party trick. To the writer, you were not wrong. You were disrespected, and you stood up for yourself, and that takes strength. And to everyone watching, what would you have done if your brother-in-law turned your breast milk into a drinking game? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Am I the asshole? Sister, 23, walked into my room naked while BF, 25, was sleeping over, thinking I left. This story starts with a quiet morning, a simple plan, and the kind of misunderstanding or boundary violation that sticks with you longer than it should. It's the kind of incident you try not to overthink until it starts creeping into your thoughts late at night, replaying in your mind like an itch you can't scratch. The writer, 29, had work that morning. She told her 23-year-old sister she'd be gone early and that her boyfriend, 25, would probably head out about an hour later. No surprises there. The plan was clear. But life, as it often does, had other ideas. She was running late. Nothing unusual. It happens. But what happened next was anything but ordinary. While the writer was still in the house, her sister, without knocking, without checking, walked into her room completely naked. Not a robe, not a towel, nothing. The writer didn't witness the moment directly, but her boyfriend did. Imagine that. You're lying in bed, just waking up, and your girlfriend's sister walks in fully nude. You don't know where to look. You panic. You hide under the covers. You point and mutter, "Your sister, your sister." Like your voice alone can make the moment go away. By the time the writer processed what he was saying, it was over. The door had closed. Her sister had bolted toward the bathroom, laughing. Laughing. That detail alone, it lingered. So the writer did what anyone would do. She asked, "Why? Why would you walk into my room completely naked when you knew my boyfriend was still here?" And her sister's answer? Casual. Flippant. "I thought you left." No apology, no embarrassment, just a light excuse wrapped in a laugh. The writer tried to let it go because this wasn't just a roommate, it was her sister. The same sister who once had drama with a former roommate for walking around her boyfriend in nothing but a towel. The irony wasn't lost. Still, the writer pushed it down, tried not to be dramatic, tried not to create tension over something she couldn't fully understand. But deep down, something didn't feel right. And then came the twist. A whole year later, her sister brought it up. Out of nowhere, not to apologize, not to clear the air, but to weaponize it. She accused the writer of centering her boyfriend, of misinterpreting the situation. And then came the worst part. She told the writer she needed therapy. Let's take a moment right here. Imagine someone crossing a deeply personal boundary, making you feel uncomfortable in your own home, then turning around and calling you the unstable one. That's gaslighting at its finest. It's a subtle emotional betrayal that twists your gut because now you're not just upset, you're doubting your own instincts. But her sister didn't stop there. She started insulting the writer's relationship, mocking the fact that her boyfriend is younger, calling her a loser, saying that he's closer to her age and that they'd relate more. Those words, they weren't random. They were designed to hurt, and they did. So finally, the writer broke. She tried to speak civilly to keep the peace. But when someone keeps stepping on your dignity like it's a joke, when they take your pain and call it an overreaction, you hit a breaking point. Goff. 2 words, raw and loud, maybe not graceful, but honest. And sometimes, honesty is all you've got left when you're done being quiet. Now the writer is left wondering, was I wrong? Was I overthinking? Was I the asshole for reacting to something that just didn't sit right with me? Let's be clear here. This wasn't about a harmless accident. This wasn't just a whoopsie moment. This was a pattern of behavior. A sister who invaded personal space, laughed it off, then turned it into ammunition a year later. And that's what makes this so messy. It's not just about what happened that morning, it's about everything that came after: the emotional manipulation, the insults, the passive aggressive jabs hidden behind sarcasm. And yes, it's family. But that doesn't make it okay. Family doesn't get a free pass to trample your boundaries and then question your sanity for not liking it. So, is the writer the asshole? Not even close. She gave grace when it wasn't deserved. She held her tongue when others would have exploded. And in the end, she defended her own dignity after being pushed too far. To the writer, you didn't misinterpret anything. You didn't overreact. You saw the red flags and called them out. That's not being unstable. That's being aware. And to everyone watching, what would you do if your sibling pulled something like this and then tried to flip the script on you a year later? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because this story, it's not just about nudity or a mistake. It's about gaslighting, subtle disrespect, and knowing when enough is enough.